So the very first question that I ask is, what do you want? And it's interesting. I heard somebody say that it's kind of like being in a taxi. If somebody gets in the back seat, where do you want to go? Right? I can't drive you anywhere unless you tell me where you want to go. So, very first question, what do you want? Now, let me be clear here. This process is the journey. All right. So it's not enough for somebody to say, oh, well, I want better this or better that. Right. I don't care about what they say. It's more about what they feel. And I'll just say this, that, people don't buy logically, they buy emotionally and back it up logically. Right? In other words, they need to feel within themselves, yes, I want this, and this is right, and this is, it needs to make sense emotionally, more important than logically. It needs to also make sense logically, otherwise the next day they're gonna say, what the hell was I thinking, right? But, when I'm asking these questions, these sales questions, I will ask backup questions, right? So I'll ask, what do you want? And if I don't feel that emotion, if I don't feel moved by their answer, then I'll start to ask deeper questions like, well, how do you know that you've achieved that? Or what's the evidence that you've achieved that? What does that feel like? What does that look like? Can you imagine it? Some people like to ask, if we met in a year, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, and you said, oh my God, my life is completely changed. This is what happened. What would you say? Right? Meaning my life has changed for the better, right? What would you say? In other words, what's beautiful about that example is that it gets people into the thinking, right? Into creativity and really tapping into opening themselves up. Really what this first question is about is expansion, all right? And so on that emotional journey, I want to help people to really expand their vision. And you can see I'm opening my chest as I say that. It's like I really want people to open to what's possible and to see, to feel, to taste, to touch, and to engage in the possibility of what's possible. A big part of the sales process is opening the door to what is possible. And so that's the best place to start, right? What do you want, right? What does that look like? And sometimes people will start to get into, oh, but it can't happen because A, B, and C. And I stop them. I say, you know what? Don't worry, but don't go there, right? Don't think about that. Do not go there. I want you to stay with that expansive feeling. If you really had the life that you want, the business that you want, the relationship that you want, whatever it is that, you're coaching around, that you're selling around, whatever it is, you ask, what would that look like? What would that feel like? Okay. And so it's important to keep asking these questions, and then until people really open up and get emotionally involved, emotionally invested. And, I'll just answer a question about that right now. What happens if they don't open up and they don't get emotionally invested? Well, then most likely they're not real buyers, right? They're not actually serious about change, and they're not serious about investing in themselves. So it's, it's a great indicator, okay? So question 1, what do you want? Question 2. So this is an interesting question, but it's the challenge. What is the pain, right? What is the struggle? And in my line of work, and again, you have to translate this for whatever it is that you're selling. But in my line of work, part of what I want to do is I want to help people see how they're creating their own reality. All right. And I start, that process of that awareness in the question that I ask. And so instead of just asking, what's your pain or what's stopping you? What's your struggle? I like to ask, why do you think it is that you do not have that already? Right? Another way of saying that is, how have you stopped yourself from achieving that? And I'll give you an example. If somebody wants to build a successful business and they tell me things like, well, the economy's been bad. I haven't been able to find the investors, external X, Y, and Z, this person left my company and now I can't do this. So there's always, people like to look at outside sources to place blame. And I know I'm like the king of this. I do this all the time, right? But I can't help with the economy. I can't do anything about the economy. I can't do anything about anybody else than other than who it is that I'm talking to. And so in order to see if this person's a fit to do this work with me, I have to get them to bring themselves to really focusing on themselves and looking deep within themselves to see where they're stopping. And so again, just like in the first question, what do you want? I need to ask a lot of backup questions to really cultivate that awareness, right? To help people to look internally and see, wow, yeah, you're right. Actually, the reason why I haven't done X, Y, and Z is because I'm afraid, right? There's fear. I feel uncomfortable, And that's a very powerful realization for people. That alone right there is kind of life-changing for a lot of people, because it really shifts the focus to how they themselves have stopped themselves from achieving success, and getting what it is that they want. And then just the emotional side of that is I also want people to really feel, really start to feel the sort of heaviness that they feel, right? And when, and again, this is the power of holding presence. When people are able to feel this elation in the first question, this expansive feeling, right next to the feeling of struggle, the vibration of pain, of frustration, just side by side, there's some beautiful contrast there. So the second question, first question is what do you want? Second question is what's stopping you, or how are you stopping yourself? And now I want to move on to the third question, right? Because we have this side by side comparison of what they want, how they're holding themselves back, right? And now what's really important is the next step is really starting to develop a sense of urgency, okay? And so the question that I ask is, what's going to happen if you don't shift, if you don't do something about this, right? If you don't take action, if you don't challenge yourself to step outside your comfort zone, get the accountability that you need, get the support that you need to overcome the fear and to really turn the ship around. And I just want to say a word here, because I know a lot of people, especially heart-centered people, we have this thing where we don't want to poke on someone's pain. We feel like we are violating by poking on the pain. And I want to give you guys a story around that, which is a true story, something that happened to me. And I think it helps to put things into perspective. And the story is essentially that one day I was filming something somewhere and I got bit by a bug, okay? And about a week later, a rash started developing on my leg, and it started off like the size of a nickel, and then it started growing and growing, getting bigger. And I showed it to a friend. My friend's like, dude, you should really go to a doctor, right? And I was not really interested. I didn't have health care, typical struggling artist. And I said, I'll just take some Benadryl. Fast forward like another month later, I woke up and I couldn't move. My leg was done, right? I had to spend an entire day in the hospital, hooked up to the IV, hooked up to antibiotics. And essentially what happened was, I lost a day of my life. I had like a $2,000 hospital bill. I had to, plus of course all the sort of, fear and trauma of, oh my God, like, am I going to lose my leg, and all that, headache and everything. And so the moral of the story here is that, my friend was trying to tell me, he was like, look, if you don't do something about this, something really bad is going to happen. And, I was lucky. It could have gotten even worse, right? And I didn't have the urgency, my friend was generous enough to say something, but he didn't hold me accountable in the sense of he didn't push on the pain and say, look, if you do not go and spend $50 for a doctor's appointment in an hour and get the proper medicine, antibiotics, then, this is what can happen. All right. And now this is hypothetical. Most friends and most people are not going to say that. But as a person who's conducting a sales conversation, if you see your client, or your prospect rather, struggling with something that you know you can support them with, that you know that if they don't do something about this, then they could very well eventually end up in a position like I was in, then it is not only good, or not good, but it is not only valid and just that you start to ask certain questions that help them to develop urgency, but it almost becomes a duty, right? It's almost your duty to really help the person develop clarity and make a decision. That doesn't say you force or manipulate the person into a sale at all, but you want to really raise the stakes on what is the potential downside of inaction, or what is the cost of inaction rather, in order for people to make a educated decision from a place of clarity. Okay? So that's really important. That's super important. And that is really the essence and the energy behind the third question of what happens if you don't take action? What happens if you don't do anything? And again, it's an emotional thing. You want to ask enough questions or ask enough times, right? And then what? And then what? And then what? So that they really start to feel down the line, what the negative reality is. So, one of the mentors that I have in sales talks about, having the positive version or the positive movie playing in the head versus the negative movie. And of course, you want people to choose towards the positive movie, but you got to get that movie clear, and they both have to be present. So the third step is really about building urgency. Now, the fourth step is, or the fourth question rather, is, are you ready to take action? All right. So after going through that process, after seeing what it is that they want, how it is that they're stopping themselves, what happens if they don't take action, then it's a pretty logical question, if this process has really been done properly, that yes, now is the time. And if it's not, if no, it's okay, I don't really need this, then end the sale right there. Again, I've done that. If I don't feel like there is a sense of urgency there, if people actually really want to do this work, I will end the sale. I will end the sale, and I will say, all right, great, I wish you the best of luck. So you want to get clear it's really, it's like you're doing a temperature check in a way, right? You're checking to see where people are at, once they start developing clarity on their situation. You want to see if they really understand how important it is to take action, because when you go to position yourself and pitch your services, you want to make sure that you're doing it with somebody who actually wants your service. Okay, so it's a clarifying question. It's a prospecting question to ask, do you want help, right? Do you want to do the work, and do you want to do it now? So first question, what do you want? Second question is, what's stopping you? Third question is, what happens if you don't take action? Fourth question is now the time? Are you ready? So if yes, then you move on to the next part. And that is the part called positioning.